Please silence your phones. Unfortunately, we're gathered here today to give kavod achron to Avigdor Yaakov ben Chaim Halevi, a man who gave his life for everybody else, a teacher most of his life, and always giving. And now, with such short notice, we were able to get so many people together for the kavod achron. So we appreciate very much what everybody has been doing for us. I want to ask Rabbi Akiva Willig, Morid Asra Beis Medrash of Woodmere, to say a kapitel Tehillim.
Ashrei ha'ish hashelo halach b'atzas v'shoim u'v'derech chatoim lo amad u'v'moshav leitzim lo yashav ki im b'soras Adonai chepta u'v'soraso yehegeh yamam v'layla v'haya ke'etz shasul al palgei mayim asher piryo yitein b'ito v'aleo lo yibol v'chol asher yaseh yatzliach lochein harashoim ki im kamot asher tidfenu ruach al kein lo yakumu rishim b'mishpat v'chatoim b'adas tzadikim ki yodea Adonai derech tzadikim v'derech rishoim toved.
We ask Meir Gold to come up, a close friend of the Nifter, to say a kapitel Tehillim.
Rabbi Dov Adonai mi yagur ya'alecha mi yishkain b'arkachecha haylo tamim v'feil tzedek v'dever emes b'vavai v'ragal al hashoynai lo yasel re'eu ro'a v'cherpa lo yinasa al karoivai nimzeh be'inov nim as as yirei Adonai yichabed nishpa v'harav lo yamir kaspa l'nasa b'neshech v'shoicha b'naki lo lakach oisei el lo yimot lo yilam.
Yes, Ronnie Rosenberg, close friend of the Nifter, to say a kapitel Tehillim.
Shir malos asana elrim mayim gevozri. Ezri mi Adonai osish mayim ba'aretz. Al yitain l'mudraglach al yinum shamrecha. Hinei l'yinum v'lo yishan shemer Yisrael. Lo shamrecha adnai silcha yad yaminecha. Yom ha'mashemesh lo yakacha v'yarech b'layla. Adnai yishmecha makol ra yishmor nafshecha. Adnai yishmor seitcha v'vecha me'ata v'yad olam.
We ask ChmZman, grandson of the Nifter, to say a kapitel Tehillim.
Shir malos HaMakom kasicha Adonai Adonai shma b'kali tianaz nacho kashvos kol dach Adonai mevanos tishmaya Adonai miyamor kim chasicha l'man torei tigisi Adonai kivson ashi l'odor echalti nashi Adonai mishomer maboker shomer maboker yichar Yisrael Adonai Adonai chasav Rebbein Mofados v'hu yiftas Yisrael mikol v'nosav.
We ask Yehuda Hefter, son-in-law of the Nifter, to say a kapitel Tehillim.
Lamanatzeach mizmol David Yancha Adonai b'yom tzara yisagevcha Shem Elohei Yaakov Yishlach ezrecha mikodesh u'mitzion yisadeka yiskar kol menuchasecha v'lotzcha yidash nesela yitain l'chol kilvavecha v'chol atzascha yimalei Yiran Rabbi Shuasecha v'Shem Eloheinu nigdol Yimalei Adonai kol mishalosecha Ato yadati ki Yoshia Adonai Meshicho Yaneinu mishmei kachov geras yisha yamino Elev v'rechev v'elev asusim v'anachnu b'shem Adonai Eloheinu nasker Hema karu v'nafalu v'anachnu kamnu v'nisodad Adonai Yoshia Amelech Yaneinu v'yom korenu. Just want to ask on behalf of myself, my wife, and my entire family, extended family, Mechila, and we should have good things in this times.
Our first speaker, Uncle Hirsch, brother of the Nifter. He's unable to be here, but he's in Baltimore, and he's going to be speaking through our new electronic system. Okay, hopefully it'll be clear.
Okay, Dad.
Okay. Yeah, only recent major surgery has kept me from being there physically, but I am with you all emotionally and lovingly, because he has quite a family and quite a heritage. My brother Victor was born on Shabbos, and now he passed away on Shabbos, so it shows what a special person he was. We were 5 years apart, but very, very close as brothers. Interesting, this Shabbos Parsha talks about Yosef and his brothers, and underscores how brothers cannot necessarily be so openly lovingly. And in fact, there's stories of brothers in the Torah are very much problematic. We have the 12 tribes, but really there are 12 brothers who did not get along that well. We had Jacob and Esau, and we had Cain and Abel at the very beginning. So sibling rivalry is difficult, and in some ways maybe even more difficult than husband and wives and parents and children to get along. But Victor and I very much were close and loving. And in fact, every week I would try, because he was always up in New York and I was always in Baltimore, I always tried to touch base with him and he with me. And it was such a loving relationship. My mother used to tell about her children, her boys, always got along, and people would say, "Oh, come on," but she meant it, and it was true. I know I heard that when I was first born, and my brother, just welcomed this baby brother. He didn't feel any animosity or jealousy. And in fact, I understand when he's tried a number of times to get into the crib with me. And fortunately, he didn't do any damage trying that. But he was certainly a loving person in many, many ways. And anybody who knows Victor Jacob Goldberg knows that this is a person who's caring and modest and has actually a humorous side to him. One of the things I tried to do, since we did keep touch by phone, was I saved a couple of his voicemails. And I just want to read you just two voicemails that I saved. When he said, excuse me, "Sorry I missed your call." He said, "I guess I need a bigger catcher's mitt to catch your calls." He said, "Oh, that's corny, but I love you so much. Let's try to talk again next Friday, Erev Shabbos." So that was him always trying to have some humor to it. And another one was, "This is your loving brother, Victor Goldberg, calling to wish you and Gail well. Hope you are feeling better and more comfortable. I'm calling to tell you I love you all the time, even when you're sleeping. Love you." So this is the kind of brother he was, and the kind of person he was, too. He really cared for me. One famous incident I remember was when I got something in my eye, and my parents couldn't get it out, so they wanted me to go to the eye doctor. And for some reason, they weren't available to take me, but he had his bicycle. So the eye doctor was about, I would say, 6-8 blocks away. So he put me on his bicycle and drove me to the doctor, where the whatever it was taken out of my eye, and I was okay. And then he turned around, put me on the handlebars again, and drove me back home. So that was Victor Jacob Goldberg. And anybody who knows him knows what a real mensch and what a kind person he is. He was also a humorous person, as you can see there. And in fact, once we traded these jokes and so on, we came up with that we were going to write a book together, and it was going to be by the Rye Bread Brothers. That was what Hirsch and Victor were going to call it, and we got a kick out of our own with that kind of title, even if maybe you or anybody else didn't, but we enjoyed that, and it was a little bit of our linkage together. He did not have a particularly easy life. He lost his wife, I think, in her late 40s, and then two of his children, because of medical situations, Bonnie and Naomi, they passed away at an early stage. But fortunately, he has a loving family around him, with certainly now with Sha'ar and Joel and Simcha, and of course his brothers-in-laws, Benjamin and Yechiel. This is an important benefit and heritage that my brother Victor leaves. And certainly we can weep for him, but we also, I think, should admire what he did with what he had, and that he was able to keep himself and people around him in a happier state. For instance, one of the poems he wrote that I published when I was with Hopkins and had a magazine, and he contributed, it was entitled Beware of Roses, and it was, thorny roses grow at stiff attention and stick me in a place I cannot mention. So that was my brother Victor. And at the same time, he was working on a document called Upward to the Mountain, and it was going to be his own rendition of a Yom Kippur prayer in his own words, and trying to convey to others what it really meant to him, and what could be meant in a Yom Kippur service, and what it was trying to convey. And he told me that he had shown it to several rabbis who really were very impressed with him, and some even asked for a copy of it. So that was Victor Jacob Goldberg, and he will be remembered, really, I think, for many of the things he's done, and that he certainly has fulfilled the promise of Psalm 133, how goodly it is when brothers dwell together in unity. And Vic, you have certainly fulfilled this role lovingly, and may you and your Shamba be rewarded in Olam Haba. And I love you, and I'll miss you. Take care, Vic.
Uncle Victor, I ask Michiel of you, and we're going to miss you.
Just wanted to add how important it is to have two brothers that get along. In this week's parsha, we saw that Yaakov gave a lot of brachas out, but only two grandsons got the bracha. And the question is, why just two out of all of them? And the answer was there was no jealousy between Menashe and Ephraim. Even though one was told he was going to be greater than the other, that's 100% fine. And you don't find that often. You find it by Moshe and Aaron, and you find it by Menashe and Ephraim. But it's very rare to have two brothers that grow up together and there's no rivalry. Next one to ask Benjamin Zimmer to come up, son-in-law of the Niftar, to say a few words. Zimmer.
There's a famous poem. It's called The Dash, and it talks about when the stone in the Beis Chaim is made. There's usually a name and a birth year on one side, and a ptira, shanat ptira on the other side, and in the middle is a dash. So it's not fair. The dash is what happened between that year and this year. It's, 85 some odd years passed between them, and there's just a little dash there. So the poem was all about, how the person's life and all the things that happened in their lifetime, it's really enclosed in that little line. It's not fair. It's not a fair thing. So on the way up from Baltimore, with my kids and my son-in-law, we put together some brief dash moments. Bereshutchem. This is a story that was told by my son Chaim, and I may have known this, but now it's a chiddush for me. My shver was very close with Rabbi Keilson, wife Ilana. I'm not sure if they're here or not. Ilana wrote a book called "Here Comes Shabbos," and my shver was very close with them. He went to their Shabbos table many Shabbatot, and she was a little bit hesitant to follow up with the book. She wasn't really comfortable with following through and writing this book, and it was with my shver's coaching and pushing. He says you have to continue. You have to do this. This is a good thing. This is good. So he was, he encouraged her to do it, and then Chaim showed me the book. I might have seen this years ago, but he showed me in the cover of this book. It's a really nice book that she dedicated the book in honor of Victor J. Goldberg for doing this coaching and pushing her to really follow through on this dream of hers. Another dash moment given by my Devorah Liba. It's a bullet. He used to say many, many times, and I remember in Eretz Yisrael and in here in New York as well and in Baltimore, not to complain, just to explain. That's it, a one-liner. Last conversation that I had with my shver was a little after 2 o'clock this past Friday, wishing him good Shabbos. We spoke every week for the past, umpteen months / years, and one of the things that we talked about, we tried to keep humorous here in this in this matzav that he was in, and so we would talk about the weather. We'd talk about more or less the containers that were sitting out in the Atlantic Ocean, and I would ask him, how's the weather outside? What's the ocean look like? What are how many containers do we see that are waiting to get into port? And he would explain to me how that works, because you have to have the workers to unload the containers in the port in Manhattan or in Staten Island, wherever they would go. So that was always a conversation piece. It's like conversation of just, a parv back and forth. My daughter, my oldest daughter, which happens to be the eldest grandchild, she reminisces 30 years ago. I'm sorry, Chaim. Rachel and Zadie went to Geula, to Machne Yehuda to buy paper goods and baked goods. For the bris, the upcoming bris, which was so kindly catered by Brother Simcha and his crew. So the catering came from Simcha and the crew, and the baked goods and the paper goods came from the bus ride into to Geula. We gave him 2 blank checks so he could pay for the pay for the 2 items, and he came back, and it was like that's not something you would think that Victor Goldberg would do. Would get on 2 buses to go into Geula and to do this shopping, but he was there, and it was a very special simcha for the family. And additionally, Rachel mentioned, and I was thinking of this, so I rewrote the note on it. We were preparing for the Suda, so he was in the apartment in Mitzvah Navo in Malay Domim. He was making this dessert. It wasn't a dessert. It was a Vorspleis out of green pepper, and then he would put a carrot, and then there was another thing, and he was like so into this culinary thing. I mean, I don't know if anybody realized that he was a culinary expert, but then it kind of like tilted and fell down. So he said, okay, let's try this again. Let's do this. Let's put this over here. The weight will, even it out. And believe it or not, I have this all on video from 30 years ago. So I'm sure there are some that would like to see it. And so I said on the video, I said, well, Zadie, what are you going to call this thing? So he said, these are fire peppers. So that was the name of this fancy thing. And ultimately, we took those to the shul across the street, to the social hall, for the bris Suda. Yecheskel, my son-in-law, said the thing that he remembered in the short time, the few years that he's with the family, he valued family very much. Valued the kids, as was said before, and the grandchildren. He was excited to see family when they would come to visit him. He loves the newest grandchild, little Rafi. He adored him very much. And one thing that he said was his aide, he didn't call him his aide. He said, "This is my assistant." That was the terminology. So that was a very nice thing. This is a nice dash type moment. Lastly, I just want to express my own memory that we had in common before I came into the family, so to speak. Rabbi Bullman was my Rosh Yeshiva in Migdal Emek, and we had not discussed the Goldberg family or the history of Far Rockaway and such at that time. But when things became closer, and then as we became married, I came married to Bonnie. I understood and I found out about the story of the Aron Kodesh of the Young Israel Far Rockaway, and it was explained to me by Rabbi Bullman first, and then it was explained to me by the Shver exactly how that worked out. That they found the warehouse, that there was an old Aron Kodesh, and this warehouse was being used by bikers, and it wasn't such a great neighborhood. And they went to Rabbi Bullman for an eitzah, for reshus, for what are you going to do? There's an opportunity here. So Rabbi Bullman said, "Send Victor Goldberg over there to that warehouse. Stay away from the bikes. Focus on the Aron Kodesh." And ultimately, they did extract that Aron Kodesh, and he renovated it, and he refurbished it, and it did make its way to the Young Israel of Far Rockaway, I guess till today. So these are some of the dash moments I share on behalf of myself, surely on behalf of myself and my extended family. We ask Mechila for anything we said or did.
We can ask Joel Goldberg, son of the Nifter, to say a few words.
As my father would say, thank you all for coming. I'll try to be brief in the words that you can't describe Victor Goldberg. He wore a different hat for each person that he knew. He had a great sense of humor no matter what was going on in life, albeit that it was a very dry sense of humor. But no matter how the chips were down, he only wanted to discuss happy thoughts, family, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and have a good laugh. He was proud of his entire family. From far and near, he treated everybody with love and respect. As a young boy growing up, I would watch him treat his parents with so much respect for his mother and father. It was almost embarrassing. I could never do the same the way he did it. To walk a mile in his shoes, nobody could do. He had very heavy losses in his life. He loved my mother till his dying day. When all the children were very young, babies, he never once woke up my mother. During the night, he did it himself. Never once woke her up. He loved my mother. In the morning, I would open up the refrigerator and he would color smiles on all the eggs. Who does that? He respected her very much. And to think her outside. So within this Eschem, they were so close. He would talk about her in such a way, even 40 years later. That's beauty. You can't find that anymore. He lost his wife. He lost children. He suffered. And he smiled. And he grew up and made his parents more frum than they were back in the day. He's a self-made frum Jew. People would laugh. He would go to Rabbi Braunstein, go to the first minyan, and finish at the second. He pronounced every word in davening, in benching, whatever. His house was always filled with sfarim, and every page had notes on it. And he never stopped. He was kind to everybody, regardless who they were. He worked hard. No matter how much pain he had, he didn't let people know it. He kept it to heart. He loved his children. He missed his other children. Like I said, he was so proud of all his grandchildren. He loved to hear stories about my son, my grandchildren, his great-grandchildren. They would talk about him, Grandpa Victor. Whenever they were in America, they insisted to go visit him. Why? Because he exuded happiness and love to all. So, in the future, I ask you all to have good memories, to tell over good stories of Victor Goldberg, Halevi. I ask Mechila in front of all of you, but I love my father. He was one of a kind. I will miss him forever. Thank you.
We could ask Yechiel Shochet, son-in-law of the Difter, to come up.
It says, when we daven, it says, if we're somech gula latfila, muftach lo shu ben olam haba. The person who's somech gula latfila is guaranteed that he's a ben olam haba. So we say Shema, we say Parshas Yitzias Mitzrayim. We talk about how Hashem saved us. We daven Shmona Esrei, and you're guaranteed to be a Ben Olam Haba. So Rabbeinu Yonah Brachas asks, It's a nice thing to be doing that, but why such a big reward? And he says, because what happened after Gulat Mitzrayim, he says, V'ya Yisrael, it has been Yom Hashem Avinu, V'aminu Hashem Moshe Avdoi, they had bitochen in Hashem. And then that's what we do. We mention, and you have right there bitochen in Hashem, and that's what we do. We talk about the nisim and everything, and then we go daven, because if we didn't have bitochen, we wouldn't daven. And then he says 5 words, which I believe captures who my shver was. And he says, V'habitochon hu ikar hayir v'amuna. Bitochon is what it's all about. That's what being a Jew is. That's the ikar hayir v'amuna. And someone who lives such a life is guaranteed that he's a ben olam haba. I have to tell you, from the time I met my shver, which is after he lost his wife, until yesterday, I never heard him say, why me? Why is this happening? He just would give brachos. We would have yortzeit sudas, and we would try to be, we're supposed to be mechazik him, and he's being mechazik us. He's saying, he's talking about the banish learning. He's thanking Hashem. I don't know where he got all his beautiful hashkafas. It wasn't only about this. It would be about Mashiach, about the world we live in. He would joke with me that we live in a world of hell. We would be joking. At the same time, he'd be serious. I would call him many times. I would call him from the cemetery on the yortzeit. And I would put him on the phone, and he would talk. He would talk to Naomi. He would talk to his dear wife, who I never met. And he would give brachas to them, Neshama Shav and Aliyah, and he would say things that were just really something really special. I wanted to repeat something that I said. I addressed this to my shver by Bani's Levaya, and I would like to repeat something that I said there. When Aaron lost Nadav Avihu, it says, Vayidom Aaron, never have I met such a person as my shver, who lives a life as Vayidom Aaron. May you be zeicha to meet the 3 holy neshamas that you lost and grieved for so long. I ask you, Mechila, for everything. Since I met you in 1986 till yesterday, I never once know of something that you did bad to me that I have to be marchal you, but I'm going to, in case I miss something, I'm going to say that I'm marchal you. And I thank you for being, in many ways, a role model for me.
Our last speaker is the son of the Miftar, Simcha.
So we're here today to give Kavod Achron to our father, Avelie ben Chaim Halevi. I don't think I can do justice in describing my father or sharing just how special and unique of a person he is, but I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to ask Mechila now in case I fall short. My father was born and reared in Baltimore. Later, to become an English teacher, he always reminded me that cattle are raised and children are reared. So I hope I got that right. From a young age, my father felt a strong connection to Yiddishkeit, writing many essays as a youth, including one entitled What Shabbos Means to Me. My father was drafted into the Army, the U.S. Army, where he continued to forge his bond with Eschem, often having to go out into the woods to daven. While in the Army, my father corresponded even with the Lubavitcher Rebbe for Adracha on how to be a frum Jew in the Army. My father kept one of those letters in a safe deposit box, among a few personal effects, just showing just how dear it was to him. Some of the other things that he kept there were letters from Rav Nachman Bolman of Ar Sameach, discussing another one of his, as the Rav quoted, beautiful manuscripts. And there was a letter in there from Rabbi Yitzchak Goodman about a manuscript that my father called The Synagogue, the Prayer Book in You, with a Hebrew title of Ian Tefillah, described, as the Rav did to my knowledge, the very first attempt in English or in any language to instill a deep appreciation of the beauty and value of our synagogues and prayer. Rabbi Goodman goes on to say that if it was in his power, he would require it in every yeshiva high school in the country, and that my father deserved tremendous expression of gratitude from Klal Yisrael. As a young man, before he was married, my father wrote a manuscript, like that was mentioned, called 10 on a Mountain, different names for it that he had over time, about the Yom Kippur experience. At that time, he was davening in the Glen Avenue Shul in Baltimore, where Rav Schraub was the Rav, and with whom my father consulted. Even the chazan of the shul was so moved by it that he later told my father that he would read it every year of Yom Kippur to help him sum up all the correct emotions of that awesome day. I recently obtained a copy of that from my bubby's home and printed copies for distribution. One Rav wrote back to me that his flux of consciousness describing his experience instant by instant is deep and riveting, and described it as reminiscent of the writings of the Piazetchner Rebbe in its depth and style. All this from a man who didn't sit and learn full time. He was raised in a loving Jewish family, but he did not come from a rabbinical family. My father met my mother, Oliver Sholem, who had already lost both of her parents and who wore hearing aids, which were not noticeable on the first date. When he was told about the hearing aids by her stepmother, assuming that he would walk away after the first date, his response was, "And?" as if to indicate that it meant nothing to him. Grandma Lillian called my father a malach just for that response. After they were married, as Joel mentioned, my older sibling, Bonnie, Oliver Sholem, was born. My mother told my father the first night that they brought her home to wake her up when the baby cried in the middle of the night. She knew my father had long days traveling back and forth by train to his public school teaching job, and because she couldn't sleep in her hearing aid, she wouldn't hear the baby. As described, when Bonnie started crying, my father felt that my mother would feel embarrassed that she didn't hear the baby, so he went and took care of her. In the morning, my mother asked why he didn't wake her up, and he told her we have a very special baby who slept through the night. She looked at him and said, well, tonight you better wake me up. And he never did. For all 5 children, my father got up with the babies, not to make my mother feel different or ashamed. After my mother was nifter, he kept raising us, especially Shira and me as the younger ones, on his own. My father always taught us by example to respect people of all walks in life, president to street sweeper. Everyone was created by Eschem and deserved to be treated as such. On top of that, we represent the Jewish people and needed to act accordingly and never make a chil Hashem. As mentioned, he always called his mother dear. He called everyone dear because he respected them, and in turn they respected him because they saw that he was genuine and humble. If I remember the story correctly, when my sister Shira got the dining room set from my bubby's house, one of the chairs had a plastic bag tied to the bottom of it. Thinking that there were parts in it They checked it and they saw that it was empty. It turns out that there were no armchairs in the set, and that my father did that. He tied that bag to the bottom to make sure that if the chairs were moved around in the dining room, that the chair would always go back to the head of the table so he wouldn't sit in his father's chair. When my father learned something, even once, he practiced that, and he would just follow through with it. If you told him something once, he would do it. One time I asked him to call me Simcha David Alevi, and he did that till the day he died. Daddy, you led a simple life as far as possessions go. You didn't need things. You only looked for ways to come close to Eschem and to help others do that as well. You love sharing Divrei Torah and Chidushim. You taught us to love Eschem and not to question his ways. Often you would tell me that you love Eschem and that you love all of his decisions. And you would remind me that you're referring to Mommy, Bonnie, and Naomi all the time. You would tell me how much you loved and missed Mommy, and that even knowing everything that you were going to go through, you would have married her 1,000 times. You said that your concern was that maybe you didn't tell her that enough. But now, Daddy, you can tell Mommy that from all of us. When Mommy was sick in the hospital, I was about 6, 5. You used to have me wear a suit to go visit her on Sundays because because she didn't get to see me on Shabbos. I didn't like it then. I didn't get it then. But now I understand, and I understand what your intentions were. You were teaching me about kibbud aim, respect for my mother, and a love for Shabbos. You were always teaching me and encouraging me in my avoda. You would tell me all the time, Tzadik v'yasherhu. I learned everything from you, Daddy. And when I would tell you that, you would always look surprised. Like, you learned it from me? Yeah. When I was 3 or 4, you used to give me a pushka with pennies, and that was my toy. And you would encourage me to put the pennies in, and you would sing Simcha did a mitzvah, and you would sing it over and over again. We get so excited by that. I'm going to carry you and your lessons with me always, and I hope that I can do half as good a job with my children. Someone like my father who dedicated his life to be Osik and Yom Kippur, Tfilas and Chesed, I would assume must be patur from having any judgment above. He was Zocha, like Uncle Hirsch mentioned, not just to be born on Shabbos, but to be Nifter on Shabbos during the time of Rabbi Deravin. It's brought down that that's a time in which there's no kafakela, no chibud kever. The neshama just goes straight up. Before I say thank you to a few people, and I apologize if I leave anybody out, I want to tell all his grandchildren just how much you meant to Zadie, Saba, Grandpa. Doesn't matter what you called him or how often you called him. He loved and took pride in each and every one of you. And Rachel, Chaim and Devorah, Begi and Nechama, Jesse, Abi and Shalva, Ahava, Ruby, Shana, Alicia, Racheli, Chaim, Yisrael, Chana. I apologize now if I leave anybody out. It's my errors, not my father. I'd like to thank Rabbi Goodman for coming. You've been there for the family for more years than I'm here. So thank you. I'd like, on my father's behalf and on our behalf, to thank Mimi Gold. I don't know where you are. You should be up front. You treated my father like family. He thought of you and your kids like family. He viewed you as a daughter. Ronnie Rosenberg, Avi Keilson. I remember bumping into Avi, who came to Lane Megillah for my father in Purim. David Ostreicher, Reb Shalom Nemtsov, Dr. Carey, his assistant, Owen, Baxter and Michael, I don't know if they're here, and all the staff at the Nautilus. I'd like to thank all our family and friends for coming in today, either in person or online. I'd especially like to thank Mala and Yehuda for helping with all the arrangements. I was stuck in a plane Thank God I made it in time for the Levaya. As was mentioned before in this week's Parsha, Yaakov's dies. We say Yaakov lo meis. Yaakov Avinu was not zocheh to be buried next to Rachel, his love. Daddy, you're going to be... You are. It's mentioned Yaakov had a very hard life. Zadie had a very hard life. A lot of similarities between Yaakov, except for the love of a brother. Daddy, we ask you to daven for Mashiach by the Kisei covered, to give our love to Mommy, to Bonnie and Naomi, and on behalf of myself, Mala, our families, and everyone, I want to ask you for Mechila if we ever didn't give you the proper covered, because you deserved all the covered. Thank you.
We can ask Rav Naftali Weitzmer, Asra Kilas Isha Yisrael, to say the Kael Mole. Zev. We'll be going to the Beis HaChaim, New Mount Carmel Cemetery, 8345 Cypress Hill. It's going to be lining up on Broadway as soon as we finish. Shiva is going to be by the Goldberg House, 300 Grant Avenue in Woodmere. Shachris, 8 o'clock. Mincha Marav, usually at 4:35, but today we don't know yet the schedule. It depends how long it takes us to get out of the Beis HaChaim. And the family requests no visitors between 12 and 1, 5:30 and 6:30, and after 9:30. We ask the family and the grandchildren to come around the nifter to take the nifter out.